folks that are looking to improve body composition, you talked about a bedrock of great eating habits. Shift the conversation a little bit. You don't need to retread over a ground that you've already trodden over in the front part of the show. You talked about fiber, vegetables, proteins. What about any considerations for someone, athlete or otherwise, by the way, the key considerations and perhaps some of the pitfalls to avoid if the goal, the mission is to improve body composition? What's some of your general advice for folks that are looking to actually improve their body composition?
I think sleep's a big one. And I know that's sort of, sleep's always one of those interesting ones with nutrition. Is it nutrition? Not really, but it has such a strong relationship, as I've described before, with nutrition, that I think what we're seeing with the research as well, if you have limited amount of sleep, it will make you or force your brain to think about hedonistic choices, salty and sweet. So I think sleep is one of those unrecognized, like, key elements. If you and it seems to have an impact on modulation or prioritization of fat as a fuel source versus, say, carbohydrates as well. So if you want to try and improve the ability to use fat as a fuel source, then potentially sleep could be one of those key elements to think about. So I think sleep and time in bed is not sleep.
Yep.
Okay, so for everyone tracking either with an Oura ring, a Whoop, or a watch, I would, suggest that look at your time in bed and at least minus 1 hour from that.
That's the typical.
That's that's an easy sort of thing. Okay, I'm in bed for 9 hours. Okay, you get 8 hours sleep. Time, you could talk about the synchronization of circadian rhythm and things like that and stages, but I think at least as a habit to start with time asleep.
Yep.
And even if you don't track, just use that general rule of thumb.
It's without going down a rabbit hole. And
I love it. I always take you down.
No, I'm not going to. You don't need to talk about it, but it is really a key consideration for a woman in perimenopause who, because of a host of reasons, has a really hard time getting really good sleep quality and often is sitting with the body unable to get into a parasympathetic state. In other words, a really rested state. And I think that has a correlation to a lot of the challenges around body composition as well, like just that connection of body and sleep is just constantly in a high stress environment.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of the research on that, so I'm not going to comment on it, but we can talk about perimenopause and menopausal women. So something about body composition, what we have seen in the research, and there's a cool study that came out of Sydney University, which looked at the reason, and again, I hear this from menopausal women a lot. Oh, I can't lose weight. I can't shift body fat. Look at your protein intake.
Yeah.
Now, and it seems obvious, the study came out that when menopausal women did not hit their high protein intake, and I think it was over 1.8 grams per kilo body weight, so high again in that recommendation where we push it.
Which is about 1 gram per pound.
So at least, look, again, that's simple. Think of whatever you weigh in pounds trying to eat. That's somewhere between that 2 and 3 grams per kilo body weight, which is what we push at Fuelin. If they don't hit that, what happens is, they will choose or reach for fat or carbohydrate sources of food. Now you think, well, what else are they going to reach for? Okay, makes sense. However, fat, calorie dense, the most calorie dense macronutrient. So instantly, if you overconsume or eat too much of that fatty food, calorie intake goes up. Carbohydrates, super easy to overconsume total quantity of carbohydrates. So again, total calorie intake goes up. So it's nothing magic about this. Again, it comes down to calories. When you neglect protein, okay, again, it probably keeps you feeling fuller, but it has some other impact on, say, the thermic effect of food and slight bumps in metabolism and whatnot. But if you don't hit that, there's
a cascading impact.
From a practical element, and it's like, I had to read the study about 4 or 5 times to get what they were saying. But it's that practical element. You just over-consume fatty and carbohydrate food types, which pushes total calorie intake up.
Yeah.
Now, does that apply to perimenopausal young females? Probably. Does it apply to young males and older males? Probably. So just think about that.
the bedrock. If body, I mean, I guess the one thing is body composition is a goal.
Eat your protein.
Eat with protein. That's
your
the bedrock.
protein.
And your fiber and your vegetables.
And what does fiber do?
Yep.
Fiber fills you up.
Yeah.
And again, are you hitting that 40, 45 grams of fiber intake per day? Hell no.
Hell no.
Now,
most people aren't.
Am I going to recommend that you go from 10 to 15 grams of fiber to 45 grams of fiber a day? No, because you're going to feel very full of something.
Yeah.
Build it up. Bit like carbohydrate intake on the bike or the run.
Yeah,
build it up, layer it in. So I say from a body composition standpoint, yes, protein, we talk about a lot. It is super important, I think, from that perspective.
Well, what about dehydration? Because a lot of folks walk around like dried sponges, and one of the symptoms of dehydration is hunger. And so that must have an impact as well. Because on daily life, most people, forget about training. We're not talking about athletes here. Most people do not consume. We just came back from a workshop, and working with a leadership team. So these are high performers in life, and across the 12 people we're working with, the average daily consumption of fluids that they were self-reflecting on in the weeks in tracking in the couple of weeks leading in was about half a litre to a litre a day. Just not enough water.
Especially if you're stuck indoors in air conditioning and things like that, you might be losing a lot more fluid than what you think about. So I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? We have reminders in Fuelin for hydrate, and some people are like, oh, I don't want that reminder in there. And we were thinking of making it optional, but actually we're going to keep it in as a mandatory just reminder, because it does actually, well, I shouldn't say actually, it does remind you, oh, actually, I haven't drunk any, and I'm thinking to myself now, I've had 2 coffees and not 1 drop of water.
Well, we're sitting here without any water on the table,
and I've been for a run this morning.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm like, I am actually
I'm right
parched.
there with you. Yeah.
So I think fluid intake, and as you mentioned, if you are dehydrated, that could mimic hunger. So you go and drink a litre or half a litre of fluid, and suddenly you're like, actually, I'm not that hungry anymore. Now, could it be boredom? The other thing to think about from body composition, you're sitting down all day, you're in front of the computer. Oh, there's a packet of chips or crisps next to you. What do? You eat it because you're bored. And it's that bored hunger. Get up, go for a walk, do some air squats, do some push-ups, something like that. Suddenly you're like, oh, maybe I'm not. So I think there's a big psychological element to this as well.
There's another impact on body composition for folks that are amateur athletes, I believe, where NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. We went through with this leadership group as well, and we tracked and we looked at the 5 folks that were consistently training to some level. And so there was one person that was really into group fitness. Okay, they did something every day. Someone else, a couple of folks that happened to be triathletes, etc. But their average steps per day outside of their 1 hour of exercise that they typically did per day was incredibly low. So they drove to the office, they walked to the office, they sat in the office, they're not burning any calories, they're not moving around. It was unbelievable. It was 3,000 to 4,000 steps a day. Then they would go and exercise an hour on the trainer. I think that's a factor of, particularly in America, I would say, with the infrastructure, all the cities here are not set up for walking, et cetera, et cetera. That's probably another component when you think about body composition. It's just increasing your daily movement.
Yeah, and I think separating out exercise from activity.
Yeah, exactly.
That is something that I tend to, if I'm coaching an athlete, is talking about that. Don't just, you can do 45 minutes group exercise and then sit on the couch or at your desk for the rest of the day. And again, working from home in post-COVID, you get up from the bed, you walk to the shower, you walk to the kitchen, you walk to your breakfast table, you sit on the couch, but all up, you could look at your watch at the end of the day and go, oh, 1,500 steps.
Exactly.
That's not enough activity. Even with a 45-minute exercise session, your actual total, again, estimated, and again, you can take pinch of salt with any estimation, is that, I mean, it might only be 1,800 calories for the entire day. But because you've sat in your house, you've got all these snacks around you, you sit at your desk eating that, you have your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, you have a few snacks. Before you know it, you've consumed 2,500, 3,000 calories. And you wonder why, despite exercising every day, things aren't going the way you want. So probably my take home for body composition is perception versus reality. Now, if you're struggling from a body composition perspective, track.
Exactly.
Like, do yourself a favor. And
Not
I know
for the rest of your life.
I know, but there will be the kickback. Oh, you don't need to track. No, actually account for what goes in your mouth, at least for several weeks, and be meticulous about how you're actually tracking that. And then you will start to realize, oh my God, 4 tablespoons of peanut butter on my toast in the morning, maybe I don't need that. Maybe I don't need half an avocado on my salad. Maybe I don't need that. Again, portion control is really important. And yes, there can be that argument that tracking can create all sorts of negative habits, and I don't disagree. However, it can also give great insight to an individual about what they're doing on a daily basis. And I think, again, when it's managed and used correctly,
Then it can be empowering.
Can be completely empowering. And then, as we described, you can use other strategies, visualization techniques as you get better. Like, I don't have to track every day. I can look at my plate and go, okay, I've got enough veggies, I've got enough fruit, I've eaten this in a day, I understand the amount of protein. Around racing, okay, I've got a specific purpose now. So it's horses for courses. If your focus is body composition, then dial it in until you get to the point where you're very, very comfortable and you are where you are. From a health perspective, again, improvement in body composition is not just losing weight.
Yep.
It's increasing or maintaining lean mass as you reduce body fat, visceral
Key
fat.
component.
That's a key component. I know we've talked about Ozempic, stuff like that in the past, and we won't go down that rabbit hole. I did write an article about this, which was recent, and Jan and I talked about it. I think Ozempic is fascinating.
Yep.
However, the potential drawbacks on it is, yes, you lose rapid amounts of weight in the form of fat, but also at the cost of lean mass. Now, what does that do as you come off Ozempic and potentially go back up in weight, but that weight is gained in fat, but you've lost huge amounts of muscle? That's where potential issues could come out in the long term. So I think it's a space to watch. And again, it's a rabbit hole.
I'll give you my 1 minute perspective and we'll wrap up, which is it's fascinating. And the next 10 years, it's the first time in decades that obesity has gone down in America, mostly related to the GLP or Ozempic family of drugs. There's all sorts of interesting stuff emerging, and we don't need to talk about it of what it's doing with clarity and cognitive function, and is there anything there? Okay, I don't know.
In terms of negative?
In terms of positive. Actually, like they're starting to think that they understand. We don't understand the long-term potential risks of it. It's really interesting of this balance between long-term health risks and long-term benefits when you're talking about a total population that is 50% overweight or obese, and
well beyond 50%.
Well beyond 50%, and I mean, look, 93% are metabolically unhealthy.
Correct.
The biggest catalyst for anyone that is, I guess, the only recommendation I would have if anyone is considering this is, like anything else, if you only think about it as the drug as a catalyst for change, and then you are likely going down a cul-de-sac. It is a tool that for some people might theoretically be useful, but it needs to come in, and this is one of the frustrations, it needs to come in conjunction with serious habit change around a lot of what we talked about: nutritional habits, exercise, movement and daily activity, sleep, etc. And then for some people, there might be a case.